Hey guys, welcome back. So now we are getting back into the Immortal Hulk because it's been a minute and you guys have been asking questions, seeking clarity, commenting on the other videos. So I just figured, hey, why don't we just jump back in? And there's a lot we gotta catch up with, so let's get to it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so jumping back in and mainly picking up from our previous talk on the Immortal Hulk King in Black tie-in, to where at the time I also included a brief discussion about the main beats that we had seen within Immortal Hulk issue 40 and 41, to where at the time we saw Joe Fixit escape the Alpha Flight space station and making his way to Coney Island with the Savage Hulk in the body of Banner. And at the time this then took us through his encounter with Ben Grimm, which first started with a fight but then led to a conversation of both of their experiences with Resurrection, but then ultimately this led us into the King in Black tie-in, which had no dialogue, but even yet and still it was an amazing issue, especially if you read it after Immortal Hulk issue 41, after that conversation where Ben Grimm tells Joe Fixit like, hey, take care of the Savage Hulk. But from here, jumping back in and following the events from the Alpha Flight space station after the escape of Joe Fixit, it was here at the time when him and Savage Hulk were captive and we came across Henry Peter Gyrich as the acting commander of the Alpha Flight Interstellar Defensive and Diplomacy Initiative, which is also over Gamma Flight, meaning that they have to do what he says too. But with seeing him here, some of you guys may recognize Henry Gyrich from X-Men the Animated Series, or even some of the later Avengers or Fantastic Four cartoons. But if not, just know that he originally worked for the US National Security Council, and from there he was sent to be head of operations for Project Wide Awake, which was the government's response for beings becoming too powerful and potentially overthrowing the government. And Henry Peter Gyrich is notorious for taking his job to the extreme, because when his focus was mainly mutants, he wanted to pick apart everything about them, down to each mutant DNA matrix and what gives them their specific powers. And Gyrich, like, he's been doing this for a while, and along the way he's brushed the feathers of the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, as well as the Thunderbolts, because he believes the world needs strict rules in order to survive and not just be overthrown by whoever. But if you don't fall in line with those rules, then Gyrich has no problem in taking you out of this world, one way or the other. But it's also here where we find out what had happened with Doc Samson, who had managed to get away from the leader in the Below place, because not long after he had made his way to the land of the living, but with doing so he had came back in the body of Walter Langowski, which at the time was being held in suspended animation within the Alpha Flight space station, which had then gave us this Doc Sasquatch situation. But with him coming back and arriving here at the space station, he was able to inform Gamma Flight and Jackie McGee about what he had seen in the Below place about the leader's involvement and the leader's ability to control gamma mutates. But even before Leonard Sanson got here in Walter's body, Jackie had been trying to tell the others that the incident and the explosion, that it wasn't Bruce. And initially she had believed that it was Rick, but when Leonard came back he let them all know that it was the leader all along. But then after the escape of Joe Fixit, Gyrich then holds a meeting with Gamma Flight, pretty much asking them how did they let Banner escape and he wasn't even a Hulk. But with calling this meeting Gyrich, he's very much using a foot on their neck type of tactic, and with doing so he even sent a text reinstating warrants out for Absorbing Man, while also threatening your Doc Samson Sasquatch amalgamation with throwing him into the same cell that the Hulk was in earlier. But even with doing this, like, he did ask Doc Samson like, where is your actual body at? And when this happened, like Puck, he was like, well, you know, that is a good question. But Doc Samson lets them know, like we'd seen before, that his body is still at Shadow Base Site G. But he lies and he tells Gyrich he doesn't know where it is. And Leonard tells him that he didn't ask because he was trying to build trust with Bruce. And Gyrich, he really just doesn't buy the narrative. But with hearing this, like, Gyrich, he then of course goes off, telling Doc Samson that he can lock him up and torture the answers out of him. But then Doc starts drawing on the glass. And immediately everybody in the room gets nervous, because without saying a word, Doc lets them know like, hey, everybody in this room can be just like Joe and we all can be a whole bunch of asteroids. But with doing this, the thing that he does tell Gyrich is that he's experienced death, and from his perspective that's the easy part. And from there, Gyrich, who had initially gave his troops the order to shoot, and they didn't because they know better, but from there Gamma Flight, they just walk out on Gyrich, and he doesn't make the effort to stop them because he already has a backup team in mind to bring in their place. But after this, going over to Dr. Charlene McGowan, we then pick up with her 2 days after the leader's simultaneous attack, back when the leader had opened the 3 doors, taking over the body of Rick Jones and Del Fry simultaneously just before he took Doc Samson to the below place. But it's here where we pick up with Charlene that we find out that she's confirmed that the other scientists have made it out, and I mean everybody except for Irwin, RIP Irwin, but also that she's made her way to one of her unofficial shadow-based safe houses so that she can work out of this location in the event of any unexpected emergencies, much like the one that had happened 2 days ago. But then it's not long after where we find out what Dr. McGowan is working on, when we then go over to Jackie McGee, not long after being demoted at the Arizona Herald, which then led her just to quit altogether. But it's here where we see her go back to her apartment, where she's met by the arrival of Dr. McGowan, who Jackie nearly pepper sprayed on site. But with finding her in her home, it's here that we find out that Dr. McGowan has been looking for other gamma mutates in order to help out, which she's been searching for with her gamma reader, which initially Dr. McGowan had used only to make sure that her own readings were safe, but with using it now to track down others, it's here where we find out that Jackie McGee is a gamma mutate since the incident that occurred in Georgeville. But in Jackie's case, she doesn't Hulk out, but instead she's able to see gamma ghosts and gamma signatures that otherwise just wouldn't be visible to the naked eye. And initially it freaks Jackie out because she sees a lot, but at the same time you can tell there's a bit of disappointment there, because throughout this series leading up to this point, Jackie has expressed that she has wanted to have a piece of the power and the privilege that the Hulk has, but with it being delivered in this way, it's not exactly what she had imagined. But then again, like in a twisted and kind of weird way, like it might be. And I say that mainly in reference to like Civil War II, after we had got the death of Bruce Banner, because back at the time, Matthew Murdock, he had then stepped in, serving as the attorney executor of Bruce's will. And back when this happened, Bruce's will was delivered through like a hologram recording, but with doing so, Bruce's message for Doctor Strange was that even though he doesn't think he'd mentioned it before, he did want Doctor Strange to know that the Hulk could see ghosts, or at least what the Hulk had believed to be ghosts. And with Bruce knowing this, he recorded all the data that he could within a book, and he left that information with Doctor Strange after the time of his death. And it's something that may come back, who knows. But after this, then going down to the below place, to where the leader notices that something is missing within the feedback loop that runs through Bruce Banner. And from what the leader understands, Bruce's alternate identities, they're up in the land of the living, which means that there should be a gamma feedback loop that cycles through, increasing gamma energy in the below place. But for whatever reason, that's not working. And for the leader, like whatever the answer is, he believes that he should have it, since Brian Banner made it work and the leader consumed and became Brian Banner. And it's here where Brian shows up to the leader and he tells him like he's wearing their souls like just a mask on stage. But what the leader doesn't understand is that with him wanting to take Brian's place, what happened to Brian Banner has to happen to him, the leader. Because with what the leader had did to Brian, the one below all had did this to Brian first. And with the leader snatching Brian's spot, the leader then had to undergo this process himself. And it's here where the leader realizes that the missing link wasn't between Banner and the living world, it wasn't between Banner and his alternate identities, but the missing connection was between him and the one below all. But after this, we then jump over to Doc Samson, or Doc Sasquatch, whatever you want to call him. But it's here where he takes Puck and Shaman to Los Diablos, New Mexico, which is the site of Bruce's original Gamma incident, but then also the location of Shadow Base Site G. And they've come here to see if they can find Doc Samson's actual body. And of course, this is all information that he clearly lied to Guy Ritchie about, as far as him not knowing where Shadow Base was. But also with bringing Shaman back into the mix, Shaman makes it clear that he's only here to help his old friend Walter Langowski, the original Sasquatch. But then from the ground, which starts rumbling towards them, and out from it pops your reawakened Del Fry, who also has a bit of Rick Jones growing out the side. And initially when they see this, like for Doc Samson, who's now inside the body of Sasquatch, but for him, he thinks back to the last moment that he had seen Del Fry, which was also here at Shadow Base, when the leader had used Del to kill him. So immediately when he sees this monstrosity, he just attacks because he believes that this is the leader and he's come back again to finish the job. And when Doc Samson lashes out, Puck and Shaman, they notice that Del and Rick, like they're not fighting back. And Shaman lets Puck know like part of Doc Samson lashing out here, it's not necessarily him, but it's that rage from Sasquatch that he hasn't quite grown accustomed to yet. And when Shaman suggests that they make a distraction in order to wheel Doc Samson back in, we then get the arrival of Dr. McGowan and Jackie McGee. and the two of them have come directly here because Dr. McGowan had got a spike reading in gamma radiation, and for that reason her and Jackie dropped what they were doing and they came here to check it out. And with them showing up here, like their arrival worked as that distraction which Shaman had mentioned to calm down Doc Samson. And when things calm down, immediately Doc Samson notices that Del Fry didn't fight back, and just as Dr. McGowan gets ready to blast this thing, Jackie then tells them that what they're looking at is not the leader. And it's here when she mentions this when Shaman takes a look through her eyes, and he then sees that it's Rick Jones along with another young man that he doesn't recognize, who we know from before is Del Fry. But it's here with seeing this that he explains that the two of them, they're in conflict with one another within this one body, because sharing a body, let alone with this physiology, it's something that neither one of them are used to. But Shaman also expresses that he's a little familiar with similar situations, which are more commonly expressed within the conversation of parasciences, which leans into the similar topic of astral projections or entities being formed from psychic turbulence and visitors from other planes. But even now, like a lot of the knowledge of these things are just in theory to most, and Shaman tells Jackie like at one point his grandfather tried to teach him all about it, but Shaman pushed many of those teachings away, so he never learned like the delicate intricacies of situations like this. And because of that, at this time all he can really do is attempt to put Rick and Del within a better alignment in order to give them some comfort, because trying to separate the two from this state is just way too risky. But while Shaman, Puck, and Jackie are up top with Del and Rick, Doc Samson and Dr. McGowan, they've went down into Shadow Base looking for Doc Samson's original body. But when they get down there, the body's gone. And as it turns out, like a couple miles away, the body is down the street, hitchhiking through the desert. But then it's here that we find that Walter Langowski had also came back, but with doing so, since his body was taken by Doc Samson, Walter had then came back in Samson's body. And with doing this, he introduces himself as Walter Samson, while also kind of giving off the vibe that he doesn't want to go back to his old body. But after this, we then jump back over to New York, where we have Joe Fixit and Savage Hulk within the body of Bruce Banner, which once again gives us a number of Easter eggs throughout New York City, like left and right. But at this time, while Joe is pretty much just scamming his way through town and laying low, and he also thinks about how much Bruce would disapprove of him stealing some rich guy's credit card, who didn't notice because he was too busy on the phone, yelling about how much he only cares about his tenants who can pay rent. So Joe Fixit stole his wallet, maxed out all his credit cards on jewelry, and then pawned the jewelry and just kept the cash. And with doing this, Joe kind of thinks to himself like, man, like what would the Avengers say? Like what would Spider-Man say? And with thinking this over, he then comes to the conclusion that this is one of the main reasons that him and Bruce are not the same person. Because even when Bruce wanted to quote unquote end the world, he sat down and made an announcement because he needed everyone's approval. While Joe on the other hand, he doesn't. But even still, there's a catch to that, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. But also, like while Joe is going on about his way, you also have Guy Ritchie in the Alpha Flight space station who's preparing his new team to come after the Hulk the next time he shows up. But then it's here with Joe where we get a bit of the blurred lines between the idea of him not being Bruce Banner because he's not the hero and he doesn't need the people like Bruce does in his opinion. Because it's here when he's walking down the street and a couple officers yell out, "Hey Hulk guy." And initially Joe thinks they recognize his face and they're talking to him, but then he quickly realizes that this isn't the case when the officers push Joe to the side to chase down a kid who's likely a member of the Hulk supportive team, the Team Brigade. And it's interesting that these officers would run past the face of Bruce Banner, who's well known for being an Avenger and being the Hulk, and you can't say like with shades you just don't know who this guy is. But with their logic, they figured that this possible teen supporter was more of a threat than the Hulk himself. And because of that, they run right past Joe Fixit, they chase this kid down for questioning, they start roughing him up, and initially Joe was like, look, I'm not gonna get involved, I ain't the good guy, and he looks at his reflection with Savage Hulk, and he pauses for a minute like, are we? And with doing this, he asks Savage Hulk, like, what do you think? And it's here where they both agree that they need to step in and teach these guys a lesson. And when this happens and they Hulk out, Joe just lets Savage Hulk have at it. And when this happens, like, he doesn't harm the officers. He picks up their car, slams it on the ground, tears it in half, and he tells them to leave his friend alone. And with seeing this, like, these officers are terrified. Because in the case of these two cops, like, attacking an unarmed kid, that they have no problem with. But then for them, on the flip side, when it comes to assessing the actual threat, suddenly suddenly it's just like they're in uncharted waters. But right after these cops flee the scene, the Hulk is then blindsided by the UFOs, who we've talked about recently in some of the Maestro videos, where I talked about the UFOs who had tried to recreate the incident with exposure to cosmic energy that it gave the Fantastic Four their powers. But also at the time, Banner had tried to bring them back before the overexposure of cosmic rays altered their genetic structure. And ever since, they have hated Banner because essentially they believe because of him, they were pretty much undercooked. But they made their way here finding the Hulk because they are the B team who Guy Ritchie had put in place after Gamma Flight had walked away. And when Joe Fixit let Savage Hulk take over to help the kid, this is what gave up their location, which is how Guy Ritchie knew exactly where to send these guys. But with them popping up here and attacking the Hulk, like the fight pushes all the way from New York to New Jersey, which isn't too far driving, but fighting, like come on. But when this happens, like they take their turns to where with one of them gets hit by the Hulk, the other one then gets their chance to step in, and with doing this, the last one up was the member of the team by the name of X-Ray. And for X-Ray, James Darnell, who's the brother of Vapor and Darnell, with his abilities, he's been transformed into pure energy. And since the cosmic incident, he's been able to produce different forms of radiation, but also manipulate radiation as well. And in this moment where he finally gets his turn to attack the Hulk, he then bombards him with cosmic rays, which are like anti-gamma radiation. And with doing this, he saturates the Hulk down to a cellular level, hoping to take him down for good. And when he does this, he effectively sends Joe Fixit and Savage Hulk to the below place, to where when they get there, they immediately find the leader, who at this point has completed his circuit with both Brian Banner and the one below all. And when they get here, like initially Joe tells Savage Hulk like, don't worry, we're good, we can just go back through the green door, but the leader then locks the door by turning it red like we'd seen before in Immortal She-Hulk. And with trapping them here, the leader then lets them know that because his circuit is now complete, he is going to induct the two of them like he did Banner, turning them into hollow servants who would just feed his power. And it turns into this all-out brawl of them just trying to stay untethered from the leader. And while this is happening, and Joe's eyes start glowing red. And when this happens, like, I want you to keep a couple things in mind here. Because for one, throughout the course of Al Ewing's Immortal Hulk, since Joe Fixit's return, he was one of the first of Banner's dissociative identities to undergo a drastic change, which like we talked about before, it associates with his relationship with Banner. But in his case, when he returned, like instead of turning into the Grey Hulk, when Banner needed a fixer in Shadow Base Site B, and B is in Bravo. But when this happened, Joe Fixit then came to the surface of Banner's body under that artificial sunlight, and he found a way to switch the emitters to gamma in order to bring back the Hulk. And when this happened and Joe took over from Bruce, it's not like Bruce made this happen with intention, but instead Bruce needed a fixer, and the fixer, he came to the forefront. But from the time that this happened, Joe noticed something, because he realized what were supposed to be the rules of like the Hulk not being able to come out at night and things like Joe only surfacing in his gray form. But along the way with Joe keeping these things in mind and figuring things out, he also realized that these rules, that they lend for a number of possibilities and even loopholes if used in a clever way. Because it's here when we see Joe's eyes glowing red, it's because back in the land of the living, X-Ray is still shooting cosmic rays on top of Banner's body. And with this happening, Joe admits that he's been holding out. Because with X-Ray charging every cell of Banner's body with cosmic energy, Joe then uses that energy to Hulk out into a cosmic powered anti-gamma Red Hulk. And when this happens, like Joe Fixit, he doesn't freeze time and like stop and look in the camera and start explaining the nuances of how he pulled this off. And I'm sure we'll get a fuller explanation in issue 46. But if I had to guess, Joe Fixit had just figured out, with himself and Savage Hulk being untethered from the leader, that he could more or less pull off the leader's same trick by drawing from the cosmic energy that X-Ray had saturated his body with down to the cell, and use that power to fight off the gamma energy which the leader had on his side. And even with doing so, it's not like he had enough to break out Banner and take down the leader, but he was powerful enough to punch the red door in order to get himself and Savage Hulk back to the land of the living. But even with seeing this, like Savage Hulk looked at him and was like, what, you the Red Hulk now? But Joe just looks at him, smirks, and says something like that. Because even though they're the same color, this is a whole different situation we got going on here. And we'll definitely talk about the return of Thunderbolt Ross later on, but this is different. Though Thunderbolt Ross has absorbed cosmic energy before, but this is something different. But with this happening, Joe Fixit, he just punches the red door, bringing himself and Savage Hulk back to the land of the living, which is nuts, cause for one, the leader kinda had a trick up his sleeve using cosmic energy to create the red door and block gamma mutates from coming back. But even still, Joe Fixit figured out a way around it, much like we had seen when he escaped Shadow Base Site B, to where at the time he said it's not all about being smarter than the other guy, but instead finding an opportunity of when that other guy does something dumb, leaving you a window of opportunity. And when they come back, he tells the UFOs like they had their turns, each and every one of them, and now it's the Hulk's turn. And they're just stuck with the Pikachu face, like every last one of them, and it's hilarious. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And also, like, what do you guys think about Joe Fixit taking everything that he's seen, whether it was when he was the Grey Hulk or even now as Sunshine Joe Fixit, and using all of that experience to now become something completely new? And even still, like, at this time, we don't know if this change is going to stick around or if he's only able to use it until he runs out of cosmic energy. But with the amount that he was given saturating his cells, I wouldn't be mad at all if, much like the Gamma incident, that this new change for Joe was here to stay. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.